guys, so today we're going to be talking about the rhetorical situation. You will need the rhetorical triangle sheet, so if you could make sure those are available to you. So let's go ahead and get started. What is the rhetorical situation? Well, the rhetorical situation is a set of ideas, a set of components that you need to think about every time you engage in a writing task or in a writing assignment. So you're given a new writing assignment, right? You need to think about at least these three things every time. You need to consider these three things. So the first thing, and you can begin asking yourself, okay, well, what do I always consider when I get a new writing task? Well, the first thing you need to consider is you as a writer, right? Who do I need to be for this assignment, right? What role do I need to adopt? Right? Sometimes if you're writing a text message, right, you're adopting a very casual, friendly role, right? If you're writing for a scholarly audience, if you're writing something for, for college, you're adopting a different role, right? You're wearing the hat of scholar, right? So you need to consider what role you're going to adopt every time you're given an assignment. Okay, this is a rhetorical analysis. I have to put my analyst hat on, right? Or this is a research paper, right? I need to put my researcher hat on. So you always want to think about who you need to be as a writer, right? The second thing you always need to think about, your audience, right? For whom you are writing. And a lot of times you're going to have different audiences, right? You might have a primary and secondary audience. So you might be writing not only for a teacher, you might also have to be writing for a peer group, right? Or you might not only be writing for a friend, you also might be writing to your family, right? Sometimes we're writing one thing, but there's multiple audiences. And so you have a primary audience as well as a secondary audience. Okay. And so the third thing that you always have to consider, and I kind of lump these ideas together, is your topic, your message, and your purpose, right? So we'll start with topic. Topic is like that one-word thing that you're writing about. Okay, today I'm writing about environmental science, or today I'm writing about the new healthcare bill, or today I'm writing about cheese, right? So it's a very short thing, but you want to think about, okay, what am I writing about? That is your topic, right? We'll go to purpose, we'll go to purpose next. Now, as writers, we are constantly writing for different purposes, right? Sometimes we're writing to entertain, right? Sometimes we're writing to inform, just give basic information. Sometimes we're writing to narrate, right? And other times we're writing to persuade, to argue, or to convince. Okay? And for this class, this is the type of writing we're doing the most of, right? We are trying to write arguments. We're trying to write things where we're trying to convince an audience of something, right? So every time that you engage in a new writing assignment, you need to think carefully about what your purpose is. Because if your purpose is off, your entire essay falls flat, right? So you're given an assignment, and let's say it's a summary, right? Summarize this book. Well, there's not a whole lot of room to put in your perspective, right? Or I forgot one here, to give your opinion. Sometimes we write to give an opinion or to opine being the verb, right? So if it's a summary, you're not going to bring in a lot of opinion, right? If it's if you're given an assignment that is meant to entertain, hey, write a short story, well, you're probably not going to bring in, again, a lot of persuasive elements. Right? So always consider, what's my purpose? What is the purpose of this writing assignment? And then finally, your message, which is what you're saying about the topic and your big point, So let's go back to the cheese example, a silly example. So my topic is cheese, and I'm going to write a persuasive essay about cheese, and I'm going to try to persuade an audience that cheddar is the best type of cheese, right? Or maybe I'm writing an informative essay about cheese. The topic stays the same, but now I'm going to give some basic information about cheese. Maybe there's 3 types of popular cheeses in America, right? So that is the rhetorical situation, and it is the first thing you should always consider when you're given a new writing task. Okay, who do I need to be as a writer? Who is my audience? For whom am I writing? And what is my topic? What is the purpose of this assignment? And what is my message? So let's go ahead and transition into the worksheet. Let's go ahead and take a pause for you to get that out. So now that you have the sheet out, go ahead and take a moment to read the 3 different blurbs here, and then I want you to consider the rhetorical situation of each blurb. So for the first one, you can go ahead and read it, and then in the triangle and in the space, you can think about, okay, what was the topic? You can write that in. What seemed to be the purpose? What seemed to be the message? Who seemed to be writing this? Who's the writer? And who seemed to be the audience? So if you can go ahead and read the 3 excerpts and then fill in the rhetorical triangle for each one, and then we'll reconvene and go over it. So we'll look at that first one, that first excerpt, and notice that the repeated word was writing, right? So that was the topic, was writing. And you can think, what was the purpose? Was this to inform, to opine? Was this to entertain? Well, it's kind of trying to persuade us that writing takes time, right? That you need to develop the habits of a good writer, that it's almost like something athletic, that writing you have to sit for hours at a time. Well, I could debate that. I could say, no, writing isn't like that at all. Writing is, totally, it's something to relax, right? So we know that it is to persuade, because it's debatable. I could say, no, that isn't the case. And then what seems to be the message? Well, writing takes work, right? That's what they're trying to convince us of. And if you have something similar to this is fine, right? So if you put convince instead of persuade, that's totally fine. Or if you put argue instead of persuade, that's totally fine. So who seems to be the audience for this? Well, probably students, right? Or student writers. And then it says Bartholomew is the writer of this piece. Who do we think Bartholomew is, though? If you put an educator or a writing teacher, you are correct. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the second one. What's the repeated word, or what seems to be the big idea? Well, writes, right? And what seems to be the purpose, right? We look at that first bit, that we are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. All of us have basic, unalienable, they cannot be alien to us rights. Well, that's kind of debatable, right? We could say, well, are we? Right? So I would say that this is still trying to persuade. And I think that'll be very clear when we begin to talk about the audience. Okay, and what are they trying to persuade us of? Well, we all have rights, right? We all have basic rights. So we know who this is, right? Jefferson. Right? Did you guys get where it came from? Do you guys know where this comes from? The Declaration of Independence, right? Which I think helps us think about our audience, right? Who is this written to, or who is this written for? Well, two different groups, right? There's a primary and a secondary. So we know that it's written to King George III, to the crown, right? This is us declaring our independence from the crown. But we also know that it's written to Americans. Now, to go back to why this is persuasive, you can imagine King George III getting this. he's not saying, yep, this is true. They do have the right to overthrow a government if rights are being, if a group of people is not, doesn't have their basic rights. I'm sure King George wasn't thrilled about this and did not agree with Jefferson's claim, right? So it is persuasive. So let's go into the last blurb. Kind of interesting, right? You notice that a lot of the language is quite similar, right? The topic still seems to be rights, right? The purpose still seems to be to persuade or convince. The message still seems to be, we all have rights. But notice the emphasis on all, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal. So in this, it's like, yeah, we all have rights, well, except if you're a woman or if you're African American or if you don't own land. But here, there's an emphasis on that idea of all. We all have basic rights, all of us. Okay, so we know the topic, message, purpose. We can think about the audience, right? Well, again, it's Americans. But now instead of writing to the crown, they're talking to the U.S. government, Congress. And who seems to be our writer? Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who is an abolitionist as well as a women's rights activist about 100 years after Jefferson wrote. Okay, so again, when we talk about the rhetorical situation, it's useful in a few ways. As writers, we want to think about the rhetorical situation every time we engage in a new writing task. However, as readers, thinking about the rhetorical situation as we read and analyze is especially useful.